No, not really. Happy to chat with you all about the work that's going on in Ethiopia, the gospel work in Ethiopia. Very excited to do that. Thank you, first of all, for all the prayers, the encouragement, and everything sent my way while I was gone, my way and Jamie and Phoenix's way. Certainly appreciate that very, very much. So what I thought I would do tonight is, I'm guessing probably Ethiopia, the Ethiopian work that's going on, the gospel work in Ethiopia is probably new to many of the people here, maybe not familiar with the context of it. So I thought I'd give very little bit of the historical context of how this work started. Wanted to chat through kind of what the purpose of this is, what the strategy of it is, talk through some of the challenges for the New Testament Christians in Ethiopia, and then really, I put together a PowerPoint that's got a lot of pictures and a lot of videos. So I thought that may be helpful just to see what is it like over there, what's the singing like over there, which is pretty cool, Steve. I think you'll appreciate that if you haven't seen some of that already, and go from there. However, that being said, for the next 30 minutes, I don't want this to be, hopefully not lecture hour, if you will. So any questions about anything that I show or questions about Ethiopia or the Christians and what it's like, please don't hesitate, ask away, and we'll talk about it. Sound good? Okay. Ethiopia. So, contrary to what you might think, I didn't spin a globe and put my finger down and came up with Ethiopia. Gospel preaching has been going on in Ethiopia for many, many years, many decades, actually. So first of all, where is Ethiopia? It's a country that I don't necessarily think about maybe too much. Maybe you haven't either. So here's kind of the path. It's in the Horn of Africa. Depending upon what airlines you fly, you're kind of a layover somewhere. There are no direct flights from Bush to Ethiopia, unfortunately. I went through Heathrow, from Bush to Heathrow, and then Heathrow down to Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia. As I mentioned, it's in the Horn of Africa. So one thing you might maybe ask, maybe you won't, my parents were very concerned about is it safe in Ethiopia? I'll tell you, Ethiopia is one of the more stable countries in this region in the Horn of Africa. Its neighbors are countries that we typically hear not so good things about: Somalia, Eritrea, South Sudan, Kenya, Sudan, Djibouti. So Ethiopia stands out a little bit in the sense that it's one of the more stabilizing countries in, again, this Horn of Africa. It's about 3 times the size. I take that back. It's about double the size of Texas, and it has basically 3 times the population, though, of Texas. But it's about 8,000 miles away, so it's a good little trek. The capital, as I mentioned, is Addis Ababa. Do not be deceived. Ethiopia is it's a third world country. It's one of the poorest countries on the planet. That being said, Addis Ababa is a huge city. About 5 million people live in Addis Ababa, which makes it bigger than Houston proper, LA, Chicago. It's under New York. So a lot of people live at Addis. It is the capital. As you can see, maybe from the topography a little bit, it's a very lush country. There's high elevation. There's some decent mountains. It's an agricultural-based country. There is some desert, as you can see in the far east part of the country, but it's a beautiful place. Again, I mentioned it's a poor country, one of the poorest on the planet. Exports. What do you think their biggest export is? Ian knows it, Daniel knows it, David knows it. Coffee. Coffee is the biggest export they have. And I'll tell you what, it's some good stuff too. Very, very good stuff. I brought home 2 kilos of it. In my opinion, best coffee in the world. But that is their cash crop, if you will, is coffee. The majority of the time that I spent in Ethiopia was in the capital, Addis, and then out in the countryside. The closest, well, not the closest, but the biggest city in kind of the region I was at is called Awassa. H is silent. It's Awassa. So the distance between Addis and Awassa is about 220 kilometers, which is about 143 miles. You might want to take a guess how long it takes to get from Addis to Owassa. Robert's got 4 hours. About 7-8 hours. 7-8 hours. Why do you think that is? Absolutely, Dan. The roads in Ethiopia, I'll say it, are horrific. Absolutely horrific, as you expect in a third world country for the most part. It is better than what it has been. I saw pavement a little more than I had before in the previous trip. But yes, I've got some videos here I think you'll appreciate. The road system is bleak, if you will. So traveling is very, very difficult. Of course, the Ethiopians, almost vast majority, no one owns cars for the most part. There's taxis and motorcycles, but especially in the countryside, you walk, or you have a donkey, or you borrow a motorcycle. That's basically the mode of transportation. So that's Ethiopia at a very high level. The gospel work, though. So try not to go too far back in history and bore you, but keep it real brief because it's probably not familiar with a lot of you guys. 1970, okay, there was an American couple named Faye and Dartha Starr. Faye is the husband. Faye's the man. Faye and Dartha Starr. And they wanted to go abroad and teach the gospel. And in those days, in Africa specifically, it was hard to get into Africa for just missionary type activities. Once you were in there, once you were in the region, yes, you could engage in, again, missionary type activities, but it was hard to get in there if that wasn't your purpose. You had to have another reason to go to Africa. So they saw a wanted ad in the New York Times for an English teaching position at Addis Ababa University. And so Faye applied to that, and lo and behold, he got it. So in 1970, they moved from the States to Addis. And it took a little bit of time, but they eventually found Christians and started work and worshiping with brethren there. I probably should add, too, Ethiopia, a little bit different from its surrounding neighbors. It's a Christian country. Now when I say Christian, please understand, in a very, very broad sense, like America is a Christian country. Most of its countries are Islamic-based countries. About 70% or so of the population identifies as Christian, and about 30% is Muslims. The Christian faith, though, is almost exclusively Orthodoxy. So similar to Catholicism, except on the eastern side, if you will, mainly Orthodox Christianity and whatnot. So my point is, Faye and Dartha Starr went over there and started working and worshiping with local Christians, mainly there in Addis. But a problem happened. I don't know if we talk about it or know much about it here in the States. In 1974, communism moved into the Horn of Africa. And so the Ethiopian emperor, his name was Haile Selassie, you may be familiar with him. He was very important here in the West. Yep, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I think he was assassinated in 75 or something like that. But what's interesting, Brian, maybe you remember this too, he had strong ties to the U.S. and other Western countries. JFK's memorial, after JFK was at his funeral, there's a famous picture in front of the casket where there's different dignitaries lined up, and there's a smaller African man in military garb on the far left on the front row. That's Haile Selassie. He had a front row seat at JFK's funeral. So again, there's your fun fact, if it's a fun fact for the evening. Anyway, not my point of mentioning that, but he was deposed in 1974. Communism came in, and as a result, all foreign nationals had to leave the country, including Faye and Dartha Starr. So they left in 1974, and I'm not sure exactly the timeline. My understanding is I think Faye died soon after that, after coming back to the States, but his wife kept in contact with the Ethiopian brethren that they had become very, very close to when their time was over there. So my understanding is they continued in contact, wrote letters, so on and so forth. So that was 1974. All right, fast forward real quick. 1999, several gospel preachers, probably familiar names. Harry Pickup, I believe he was teaching at Florida College at the time. He had done some international traveling for the gospel. And Dartha asked him if he would go to Ethiopia. The communism was out of the country for the most part then, and asked him if he would go and encourage, strengthen, and teach the brethren there. And so Harry Pickup, Bob Owen, Jim, Melvin Curry, and James Finney went to Ethiopia in 1999. And what they found was a huge opportunity for the gospel. Again, this being a fairly stable country in this part of the world, being a Christian-based country, so to speak, but found a rich evangelism field, if you will, for strengthening the gospel in that country. There was a problem, though, with those four individuals. In 1999, all four of them were in their 70s at that point. So logistically, they quickly determined, hey, we need some younger people to start going over there. And so, I'll speed this along, sorry. So Bob Owen, I believe, was holding a gospel meeting, or maybe this is a Bible study, I don't recall, with the local preacher where Jamie and I and John Moon grew up, Castleberry, has several ties here, David Holder, several ties with the Garrett family specifically. And I believe it was Bob Owen asked David, hey, will you start going to Ethiopia and get involved in this work and whatnot? And David did, and thus started a 20-plus year, I won't say journey, but I guess it really is a journey of going over to Ethiopia habitually every year to strengthen and encourage the Christians there. And David recruited other people to go with him. Randy Harshbarger has gone many, many times. Some people that have some Houston roots. Curtis Pope has gone multiple times. Quite a few people. It didn't take very long, though, to find out from the Ethiopian women. Guess what they wanted? Any guesses? They wanted, you need to send some women over here to teach us too, right? So that was identified very early on, the early 2000s. It took a couple years, but maybe you guys know of Sister Pat Underwood. She started making the trip to Ethiopia, and she was beloved by the Ethiopian people in a huge way. She passed in 2016. In fact, it's not uncommon. Ethiopia, they don't have the same resources and culture and things like that. So there's not very many pictures, but when you go to people's houses or their huts, sometimes they'll have pictures up. Not a lot do. But I kid you not, when I was there just a month ago, 3 different places I went, there was a picture of Pat Underwood sitting in their house, which was very cool. John Moon and I grew up there. I mean, Pat Underwood taught our Bible classes when we were kids forever and whatnot. And so the first time, speed this up, Jamie and I went to Ethiopia together with David and Sister Pat in early 2008. So that's kind of the contextual piece. Current state, David, health-wise, is no longer able to go. So like what was done to him in 1999, he asked myself and his son-in-law, Daniel Lee, who preaches at the Granbury Church, to kind of keep this work going, and we were happy to do so. Any questions about all that? That's a lot of history. Brian? What's your language? Yep. Well, the official language is Amharic. It's the only place in the world Amharic is spoken. The issue is there are over 80 regional dialects in Ethiopia. And I'm not talking about, like Yankees talk English but with a northern accent and we talk southern. No. We're talking like, Spanish and, Italian. Different languages. And so I've got some videos here you'll see. So when we were over there, most of the time we use a translator, someone that translates from English to Amharic. But a couple places we go, you have to have 2 translators, which that's a whole nother situation. So I want to go from English to Amharic to Doyamo or Hadinya or some other regional dialect. Yep. Okay. So the purpose of this work, and I want to be very specific here. The objective is we go over there and we talk through, preach and teach and encourage existing Christians and existing gospel preachers. Now, that would be clear. That's not to say, hey, if someone wants to come in off the street and, let's talk about Jesus and God and open up the Bible, fantastic. That's not the objective, though. The objective is, think of it like from a corporate America perspective, to train the trainer, if you will. And so I'm just throwing out there, I'm guessing probably 90% of the people we talk through, again, are existing Christians So it's about encouraging, supporting, building up their knowledge, if you will, and those type of things. Okay, there's some challenges. How to say this the right way. I'm of the opinion there's not a lot of things we or I have in common with the Ethiopian brethren. Languages, cultural differences, things that we think are normal here are completely foreign over there. Things that we think are absolutely, why in the world would somebody say or do this? Completely normal there. Economic differences, we look different, speak different, there's a lot of differences. However, you think about Acts at Pentecost, right? So Jews had come over all over the known Roman world. Different languages, different customs. I'm guessing they look different and whatnot too. But after hearing the gospel, we read that they had all things in common. The Lord was adding to their number daily those who were being saved and whatnot. So I think about that a lot over there with the Ethiopians. Again, in normal circumstances, we probably wouldn't have a lot of things in common, but through Jesus, we have everything in common. Hopefully you see some of that tonight. But that does present specific challenges, which is what I was getting to. One of the biggest challenges is literacy rates. Roughly about half the population is illiterate, can't read or write. Now the good news is that's changing. Normally that's the older generation, or the ones that can't necessarily read and write. The younger generation, they're in school, and so now, in school they are, that's happening. One of the great things too, specifically in Addis, in the city, is the kids' school is taught in English. So this literacy problem, hopefully, it's going to run its course out, so to speak, and with the new generation and whatnot. But as you expect, that proposes specific challenges. Hey, I want everyone to have a Bible, right? That's fantastic. Everyone should have a Bible. If you can't read it, that's a problem, right? So personal study and things like that's a challenge. And then, as we already mentioned, just from a logistical perspective, a lot of the infrastructure in the country, it is very, very hard to get around. So here's a couple photos. You wouldn't believe it, maybe a little dark. This is in the capital city of Addis. Okay, this is a normal street in Addis. So dirt road, people everywhere, animals everywhere. My words, junk everywhere. And so again, challenging in that sense. Here's another road in Addis, the capital. So as you can see, there's bricks. There's am I have this feedback going, Jeremy? Pretty strong. Bricks, everything else. What do you do in a road like that? Well, here in the States, right? There's probably cones up and say, hey, go around, detour. No, you just go right over it or around it, or try not to hit a goat or a camel or a donkey or something like that. One more example of the roads here. This is going out of Addis into the countryside. It's paved. Fantastic. How fast do you can travel on that pothole-ridden road? So roads are maybe the biggest headache, the biggest problem. Ethiopians hate them too, not just us Americans. You can't go 75 like you can down I-45 to Galveston. It takes a while. So one of the most encouraging things, though, is despite the challenges, there are great workers over there. Gospel preachers, and so there's a lot of them. I highlighted just 3 tonight. I would share with you 3 people that are especially close in this work. One is Mesfin. Mesfin's a gospel preacher in Addis. He speaks 6 different languages. He's from a village out in the countryside, rural. When I say villages, I hope you understand too. I mean, we're talking like grass huts, no electricity, that type of stuff. Something's neat about Mesfin. Before he preached full-time, he was a very successful small business owner, which is, again, very different than quote-unquote normal. Zerahun, a really good man, very wise man, someone who I'm very close with and whatnot. I've got a good story about Zerahun. If we have a few minutes, I'll come back and tell it. And then Addisi. These 3 individuals served as translators in really everything, support, organization, as we work through both the city as well as the countryside. All three of them are gospel preachers in Addis. So this was the team, if you will, if you want to call it a team, that got together here just last month. So Randy Harshbarger is on the right. Again, he preaches up in Nacogdoches. Daniel Lee's there in the middle. He preaches in Granbury. And then I think Ryan would be okay with me saying this. Then the two amateurs, Ryan Harrison, who him and his family live in San Antonio, and then myself. Ryan and I obviously are not the gospel preachers, hence the term amateurs. But great guys. Randy, this was his 39th trip to Ethiopia, so he's got the Ethiopian airline miles. If next time y'all need some, get with him. Okay, so I flew into the country. The other individuals were there already. Daniel and I kind of overlapped a little bit. Then he went home. I came in, so to speak. But Daniel, I grew up with at Castleberry. Again, that's David's son-in-law. So one of the things about the work here is, when I say work, it really is. So I flew in on a Saturday morning, got there at probably 6 a.m. and whatnot. Went to the hotel, showered, changed clothes, got with Daniel, and then we immediately, let's go to Wubeshet's house. So this is at Wubeshet's house. Wubeshet is a preacher, or used to be a preacher there. He's pictured there with Daniel, him and his wife. One of the sad things about Wubeshet is he's got kidney failure. He's on dialysis. In fact, we came to his house specifically to encourage, pray for him. In fact, before we left, he said, boys, I don't think you're going to see me again for the next time you come and whatnot. But on the left-hand side, these are preachers, probably about 15 of them or so from the capital, came together, and all we did was just have Bible studies. They all speak English, which was great. Didn't have to use a translator and whatnot. I preached from the gospel of, going in, what I put together was various encounters of Jesus from the Gospel of John. So in this situation, I think I talked about Nicodemus in John chapter 3, Samaritan woman, John chapter 4, several of the Jesus' I am statements, the healing of Lazarus, Jesus washing the disciples' feet. That's what I spoke on most often. It is interesting, though, we go different places every day. So I didn't have to have 40 lessons. I had about 10 or so that just kind of rotate around, if you will. I don't know this, but hopefully by the end they were better than what they were at the beginning. This is at the church that meets, one of the churches in Addis. Daniel taught, I believe, from Philippians. Here I was teaching from John 4, the Samaritan woman. It's kind of hard to see. This is the nicest church building I have ever seen over there. On the left-hand side there, it has walls. It has a metal roof, and it has one light bulb in the middle of it, which that's a big deal. And this is in the city. It just so happens one of the members there is a very successful coffee exporter. Does very well with that, and so they were able to build this building up. On the right-hand side, this is Daniel with some kids and whatnot. That's houses there, kind of behind that sheet metal and whatnot. One of the interesting things was at this place, they had a sound system. I've never seen a sound system in Ethiopia, but I tell you what, it was the most obnoxious thing ever. We drive up, and it is blaring. They're singing, which is great, but it is just blaring. And so I told Badassa's on the right-hand side. Berhanu is in the middle between me and Daniel. I asked Badassa, I was like, what do your neighbors think of this? I mean, this is just, blaring stuff. And his comment to me was, if we play it loud enough, Jordan, they're going to come hear you preach. So no pressure with that, just to get it to stop, if you will. Whatever it takes. But it was great to, again, be with the brethren there, encourage them, speak to them. Here's just another setting in another church there in Addis that we got together and talked to existing Christians. From Addis, we moved out to the countryside. These are just some of the, if you believe it or not, on the left-hand side, that's a road through the river. Don't hit a cow or anybody else, washing clothes on the way out there. But the countryside's beautiful. Here's driving through, just so you get a sense of kind of what it's about. Countryside road. Our summer months is the rainy season, okay? Imagine going through this in the rainy season. You can't do it. So travel, for the most part, if you don't have a mule or you're not walking, you're not traveling in the rainy season. You can't get a vehicle in a lot of those parts of the country anyway. So, again, just more, I spent way too much time on the historical stuff, so forgive me. Whoa. Let me go back just a couple slides here. So just real quick, one of the things that was great about the countryside that I loved is out of the hustle and bustle of the city. I already told you, 5 million people in Addis, people everywhere, animals everywhere, debris everywhere. I stayed in this hut on the left-hand side for about a week or so. It was amazing. Now, to be fair, the power worked part of the time. There was no Wi-Fi in the hut at all. And it was a gravity-fed shower that was sometimes warm. But I'll tell you what, it was fantastic to be out in the countryside. More Christians, what we'd go is every day we would pretty much gather up, hop in the Land Cruiser and drive, typically a couple hours, to some village. Most of the villages don't just have a building per se. It's just, hey, let's put up a tarp above us and meet and talk and preach and ask questions and sing and things like that. So very, very, very encouraging. Some places do have buildings, though. You won't see any light switches or light bulbs there because there's no electricity in these village sides communities for the most part. Which the odd thing is, everyone there, I'm going to say everyone there has a smartphone. That's just, you just have a smartphone. How they charge it, my understanding, is solar panels and whatnot, but don't have running water. There's no toilets. It's a hole in the ground, but everybody's got a smartphone, which is interesting. One thing that's different is the singing. I should have asked Kruger about this. I think it's called antiphonal singing, see, right? So there's not 4 parts. There's not a harmony. A lot of it is saying something, a phrase, and repeating it back. I've got a video here in a second I'll show you. Probably the best song leader I've ever heard in Ethiopia, maybe even ever. Very, very capable man. He is so talented. What he does is after you've done preaching, teaching, whatever your sermon was about, he gets up and on the spot, there are no songbooks, obviously, he makes a song up about what you just spoke about. And so he'll sing some line, the congregation will repeat some chorus that corresponds to that over. It's amazing is what it is. It's fantastic. It's very, very encouraging. Very, very, I mean, we have talented people here, obviously, but very, very talented. Some villages is different. So this village, you see the kids are kind of sitting at the front on false banana leaves, and the women are sitting kind of behind them, and then generally the older men, the elders, kind of make a U shape right here. That's how some do it. Other villages is very different. The men sit up front, the women sit in the middle, and the kids sit in the very back. I asked about why that was, and I couldn't get an answer really that made any sense at all. Just culturally, it's a little bit different. You don't have assigned pews, I'll tell you that. No assigned pews. There. David. Yeah?
You talked about this being encouraging and edifying the teachers, but it seems like where you're teaching here, I imagine this is a village showing up just to be a part of it, non-Christians or non-believers.
Well, you would think so. You would think so. The majority of those are brethren from that village that are coming. Now, to be clear, to your point, we look different, we sound different, we attract a crowd, and so yes, there are some of that hey, who are these Americans? I want to go listen to whatever they have to say, which is great, by the way. One of the things you'll find in Ethiopia is you leave all privacy right when you get in the country. There is no privacy. People stare at you, follow you around, ask for money, of course, and whatnot. But it can be a troubling type of experience. Just quickly, I'll tell you this story too, just to articulate that point. So I got sick while I was over there, food poisoning, avocado, not good, in the hut. I couldn't keep anything down. I kept, TMI, but we'd go on the way to villages, and I have to tell the guys, hey, you got to pull over so I can blow some chunks on the side of the Ethiopian road. So if you think there was ever time to have some privacy, middle-aged white man from America throwing up on the side of the road? No. I hop out, everybody swarms in. Just stare. I mean, me close to me, everybody just to stare at me, throwing up on the side of the road. So, sorry, but that's the lack of privacy I'm talking about. We did, David, to your point, maybe we're going with that. We did several targeted preacher workshops where preachers came in from all over the countryside to a specific place for some teaching. We did 3-day workshops with those. This is one of them. Here, I'll quickly move along. One of the great things was Ryan and I right here. The preachers came in and they brought their sons with them too, which was really cool. So about 150 preachers came in. This is about 60 or so. Not everybody's there. Younger men, this is their sons or relatives. And so we get to spend 3 days with them, talking through various things. Again, I mainly did it from the Gospel of John. Ryan did quite a bit from 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, talking about equipping them for future leadership in the church. I'll quickly move through some of this. Okay, so I was sick, wasn't feeling too great. Wasn't really hip on the 7 hours back in the Land Cruiser back to Addis. Especially I felt bad for my compadres. Didn't have to, every 30 minutes, hey, let's pull over for a little bit. So it just so happens in Awassa, they have a small regional airport. When I say small, I mean small. So I thought, well, what if I took a one-way flight from Awassa back to Addis? It was a 25-minute flight. It was fantastic. Guess how much it cost? About $50 US. To save 8 hours, I would have paid many more times that, but it was probably the best buy I had of the trip. This is random. This is in Addis. That blue car is a taxi. You see what's on top of that? A live goat. And is that normal? Absolutely. Saw that 100 times. Your livestock is kind of bound up on top of a taxi going to the middle of town. Again, a little bit different than maybe what we're accustomed to here. Again, this was at the preacher's workshop back in Addis. There's Bryu, you saw him a second ago, and some other kids. One of the things we did for, again, people that could read and whatnot is we bought Bibles over there, which you'd be surprised. Here, Bibles are very accessible, which is fantastic. Over there, Bibles are a hot commodity. It is very difficult to get Bibles. In fact, think about how big Ethiopia is. You can basically only get Bibles in the capital of Addis. And on top of that, they are very, very expensive. And so one of the things that we were able to do is to purchase quite a bit of Bibles and give those to the brethren and whatnot. Ethiopian food's good. I don't know if y'all have had some Ethiopian restaurants here in town. There's no such thing as silverware. You use hands and injera to scoop up, if you will. But very, 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 very good. Any other questions? Brad?
Given their languages, is it difficult therefore to have Bibles?
No, very much so, because even if you get Amharic Bibles, there's still a percentage of the population that aren't going to be able to read it. So no, yeah. Those other regional languages, my understanding is there are no Bibles produced in those languages. No.
It seems to be fairly reasonable cost per Bible, but I don't know how possible that is.
Well, again, if it's Amharic, yes. One of the things that was different this time, where Ryan attends in San Antonio, one of the members there found online some audio Bibles in Amharic, which was great. They're expensive. They're about $70 a pop. So Ryan, I think, bought 10 of them and brought them over there because there's a few preachers out in the countryside that are blind. And so Ryan gave those, it was Christmas morning. It was absolutely fantastic. So yes, there are some of that. That's another resource that is out there too.
Are they corresponding with all
it's all Q&A type stuff. Yeah. Maybe this is the last video I'll show and then shut it down here, so sorry. Here's that gentleman, Steve, I was talking about. Maybe the best song leader I've ever heard. This probably doesn't do it justice. It's about 150 preachers together in a room. He's the one that would, again, improvise whatever your lesson was about. You're singing a song about it afterwards. Very, very encouraging. So I will say, maybe in closing, again, this is my second trip here. It was communicated that I agreed to, continue going and whatnot. Part of it was, a compromise with Jamie. Do I go every year or every other year? We'll see how that works out and whatnot. But very encouraging. It gives you a new perspective, people. It really, really does. Very humbling experience, very encouraging experience. It's changed my life. I've only been there twice in a very, very profound way. The flight I took back was a little bit different. You guys that know me well know I like Israel quite a bit. I'm a big fan of Israel, and so you're in the Horn of Africa. It's a short flight up to Israel. So I stopped in Israel for a couple days on my way back, not in an evangelistic type effort. Jamie said she didn't mind if I stopped there, so I spent 4 days in Israel doing some hiking and seeing a few things. Some of the caves that David hid out from Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 17, which was very cool. So Tel Aviv to Toronto to Houston. As I mentioned, my biggest concern was in Toronto, I lost my bag, which not a big deal. It just had clothes in it, but the most important thing I had in it was 2 kilos of coffee, and I was worried I wasn't going to get that. But you know what? United, 3 days later, the bag shows up at my house. The coffee's still intact, so that was a win. Any final questions or thoughts? Again, guys, this is a macro 30,000 foot view in a very, very short amount of time. But any questions in closing? I would say everywhere I went, everyone says, Jordan, thank the brethren in the United States for support, for encouragement, for prayers, for allowing us to come over and share the gospel with them. Again, it's a humbling experience. It's a fruitful experience because you can see the fruits of the gospel message. It has nothing to do with the preachers or the teachers, for sure. It has everything to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it is certainly at work in this country in a very strong and powerful way. So thank you for letting me share that with you. Of course, if you have any questions, be happy to ask those offline or whatnot and go from there. Oh, I would say one thing in closing. The Ethiopians, they know we give these reports when we come back. And so they always give you some Ethiopian wear to put on and whatnot. The problem was the Ethiopians, generally speaking, are smaller people than our Americans and whatnot. So here's the shirt I was given, which isn't too bad, but I couldn't get it over my head and shoulders. So this is it. So if anybody ever asked you, I brought it. Phoenix is wearing his shirt that was given to us to bring back and whatnot, but my shirt will go in a safe place, not on me. Ryan?
Yeah, one more question.
Please.
First, we know of the Ethiopian tunic, so I've always heard that there was Ethiopian Jews.
Yeah.
You see a president? Is there a Jewish president?
There's a Jewish president, mainly in the northern part of the country. So again, the northern and the west are mainly the Islamic hubs, but in the north as well, there is a Jewish presence. A little bit different of a Jewish dress and customs than like Israeli Orthodox Jews. But yes, there very much is a Jewish presence there. In fact, I want to say it's like, I don't know, maybe 3% of the population is Ethiopian Jews. So.
You get over to see the Ark of the Covenant?
So there's a rumor that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. It's hidden. People know it's there, though, but it's hidden. I think it's kind of ironic. It's in the Islamic area up there, which is not too safe to go to. Randy, who's been, again, 39 times, an Orthodox Christian was telling him, hey, we have the Ark for sure. I know it. And Randy, Randy likes to kid and whatnot. He's like, well, how do you know? How do you know? And they went back and forth. And finally, Randy said, I know you don't have the Ark because if you did, you would charge people $10 to go see it and make a killing. But yes, there is a rumor that the Ark of Covenant is somewhere hidden somewhere up in northern Ethiopia. Did not see it. So I think it's in a warehouse with Indiana Jones, if I recall. But okay, so Daniel, I'll turn it back to you then.